South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk Yeol has failed to appear for interrogation at the Corruption Investigation Office for High-Ranking Officials, or CIO. His lawyers saying the leader does not see the need to respond. Mr. Yoon remains in police custody for the third day after his petition challenging his arrest was rejected. The CIO is looking to file another warrant today to officially arrest the South Korean leader. For more, we are joined by David Hundt, Associate Professor of International Relations at Deakin University. Professor, thank you for making the time to speak with us. Investigators, they're expected to file for a warrant to formally arrest Mr. Yoon before a deadline this evening. Walk us through what could happen next. How much longer could he be detained for?
The extended arrest warrant can be for up to 20 days. It doesn't necessarily have to be the full length of that time. It could be something negotiated between the parties, but certainly 20 days would be a much wider window than the 48 hours that was sort of initially granted earlier this week.
So if they do hold him for another 20 days, they try to question him, what could happen? So far, Mr. Yoon has been refusing to answer questions.
He has. It's sort of been. It seemed to the best we can understand his own perspective and his legal strategy. The delays or the refusal to engage in the process has been sort of a combination of believing that the law was on his side. So his argument was, well, I don't have to take part in this process because my legal interpretation is correct. But in a sense, that has that argument is now much weaker because his legal team had filed an appeal against the arrest yesterday. It was tried and in a court in the Western District of Seoul, and that court found that there was no problem with the validity of the arrest warrant. So his position is much weaker. And therefore, I guess you could say that if a new warrant is granted, sort of with the process that's being lodged probably later today, then the repercussions of a continued lack of engagement in the process in dealing with the investigators would be much more serious.
So if he continues to refuse to answer questions, can authorities still proceed with their case against him?
Well, they can. It's also worth just noting that the CIO is not the only authority that is seeking or is currently investigating President Yoon. Of course, the Constitutional Court has been considering the case and has even as recently as early this week been holding hearings. They did invite President Yoon to appear, or his legal representatives to appear there. So that process is ongoing. The CIO process is currently underway, as we know. And in addition, there's the Public Prosecutor's Office, who would also like to speak to President Yoon about some of these charges. You could say that the only question is which arm of government is going to sort of proceed first with the investigation. There's a consensus amongst them that there are certainly grounds to investigate. So it's sort of worth thinking in those terms, I suppose.
Mr. Yoon being probed on multiple fronts, as you have said, but he's defiant that he hasn't done anything wrong. Are there any chances that he could walk away scot-free?
Well, it's possible, I suppose. He's going to have to sort of beat a few hurdles. But again, each of these, the sort of the public prosecutors and the office and the CIO are sort of probably have most in common in the way they're looking at the problem and the sort of the punishments they might mete out. The Constitutional Court is somewhat different. That's just merely a matter of disqualifying an official from public office. But I think it's worth noting too that in all three cases, they're treating testimony by the president as certainly a very important form of evidence, but it's not the only one. They've also there's also been several other officials who have been removed from office already, sort of and are being investigated. Including the chief of the army, who was sort of the person who announced the martial law order in December, and there's also documentary evidence. Yeah, so there's the defence minister, of course, too, resigned and has been speaking to investigators. So they don't necessarily that if President Yoon refuses to engage, it makes the case, it makes the task harder for the investigators. But I mean, there's so many things that have been said and done in the public eye, including the president's own statements on national television, that can be used and will be used against him. So it's not. It might slow and it might complicate the prosecution of these cases, but it doesn't mean that they won't necessarily result in a prosecution, a successful prosecution of the president.
Looking at the bigger picture, what impact could all this prolonged political turmoil have on South Koreans and the country's development?
Well, I think there's been a sort of opinion polls, including one sort of released this morning from Gallup Korea, suggesting that I think that the results should be sort of parsed carefully. They're suggesting that the support for impeachment has declined. I think the public is tired, is already quite tired of this process. It's very unedifying. It's quite it's not what you want to see happen in public life. That's for sure. It's certainly not the way that anyone wanted to see it play out. So I think they would like to see to move on from this position. There is still clear majority support in favour of impeachment and belief that the president has done something terribly wrong and should be no longer in public office. And I guess in the background, of course, we're days away from the new president being inaugurated in the United States, the South Korea's key ally. And when you think about it, for the last 6 weeks, while other countries such as Canada, Mexico, some European countries have been trying desperately to engage the US and the incoming Trump administration about what they consider to be key issues in national life, most of South Korea's energies have unfortunately been tied up with internal matters, and also I hate to bring it up, of course, the terrible plane crash just a few weeks ago too. There's plenty other things going on, and the last thing that South Koreans need is this political crisis, the very self-inflicted one by the president.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing your insights with us. We were speaking to David Hundt from Deakin University.